G'day guys, and welcome back to your English Aussie. Today we're going to go through game week 21 captaincy picks. I think it's a really tricky week for captaincy with Mo Salah up against Nottingham Forest this week, who did manage to beat Liverpool 1-0 in the opposite leg. And we will go through all of the captaincy choices that you guys commented on my posts, my community post this week. Also a note for you guys, I have created an FPL mini league. The code to it is below in this video. You'll see it flashing up across the screen here. Please join if you're keen to get involved. I will also set up a second chance mini league for those of you that want to start and join one from game week 19. I will put the code in the comments to this video. Yeah, please give that a like and join from the comments afterwards. Also, shout out if you are watching and you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please try and subscribe to the channel for more good tactical analysis and statistical analysis and to keep up to date with the latest videos. I really appreciate all of you guys that watch these videos. Also, watching to the end very much helps the YouTube algorithm. So even if you just leave it running, that'll be great. No, good for you guys. Enjoy you guys watching. Let's get straight into the video. So first up, we will talk about Mo Salah against Nottingham Forest and some of the key points that we have for this game. Firstly, we just have to talk about the form that Mo's been in recently. And I think he's only blanked in 3 game weeks out of 19 that Liverpool have played so far this season. He's already reached 200 FPL points halfway through the season and just is on a run of form which is simply ridiculous. It's very hard to ignore and we really haven't seen anything like this before in FPL. It's very hard to ignore and for me that really does make him difficult to captain against. However, this week he is up against Nottingham Forest, who did manage to beat Liverpool 1-0 in the opposite fixture, where Liverpool were actually at home in that fixture. Nottingham Forest in that game did set up in a 4-2-3-1, which is their sort of usual defensive structure, where they're so defensively solid in that back four, with Murillo and Milenkovic at the back, and then Aina and either a Nico Williams or a Alex Moreno at the fullback position. Nottingham Forest have also experimented with sort of a 3-4-2-1 formation, which is actually the formation that Manchester United implemented against Liverpool that Amorim likes to play last week. What happened in that game ultimately was the sort of 2 10s, which were the Fernandes and Ahmad, actually played very high against Liverpool and pinned back Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson and didn't allow them to sort of push forwards. That actually exposed our fullbacks a lot to a lot of one-on-one defending. And if you have sort of watched a bit of Liverpool this year, you'll see that both Robertson and Trent have struggled in various one-on-one situations this season. I would say normally Andy Robertson's someone who's really reliable in the seasons gone by, but this year has been someone that opposition defensive has targeted in those sort of one-on-one situations. And for United's final goal, it was that he just lost a little bit of a track of Ahmad, who just snuck in there to finish off for the 2-2. On the right-hand side, Trent obviously has been a big talking point this week. It's nothing that I haven't spoken about before on this channel. Obviously, like I have previously been saying, that Trent has been a sell, and only just over the last game week have thought of him as somebody that you should start to look to bring into your team. I actually think the sort of conversation around Trent is almost amusing because I've been in the complete opposite direction all year. Now everybody's looking to get rid of him. I'm actually someone who would be saying he's somebody that I'd be definitely looking to bring in. Probably more for game week 23 against Ipswich and then the double game week 24-25. But yes, Trent being pinned back into that role has allowed opposition attacks to sort of have that sort of one-on-one situations with him. Trent has never been a particularly great defender. His skills lie in his offensive nature, his ability to pass, his great technical abilities. His one-on-one defending has never been something that's been fantastic. Liverpool have known that for years. You've seen in Champions League finals him be exposed in those sort of positions. So This season you have seen him playing that sort of reduced more defensive role, not get into those attacking positions as much. So this against Man United was no different. It was just more so that United specifically targeted the fullbacks, often doubling up in that sort of 3-4-2-1 formation with a Delo and a Fernandes down the left, or Ahmad and their fullback a wing-back down the right-hand side. So these were the sort of tactical problems that it caused Liverpool. It also allowed Man United to sort of have enough players in those roles to stop Liverpool pushing those fullbacks forward. Then in the midfield, where Liverpool sort of had an overload of that 3-2, what happened was their back three allowed De Ligt or a Maguire or a Martinez, it was normally De Ligt and Martinez, to step up onto that third midfielder and really get right into their back and stop them having the ball. If those midfielders were to run on, which is what Liverpool have been so effective at this season, is having that high energy in midfield, their midfielders really pushing on through the attacking lines. Because United had those three centre-backs, that allowed one of them to be tracking those midfield runs, while the other one stayed with the forward, and the other one could pick up one of the wingers, while the other wing-back on the wrong side of the play would drop in and be able to deal with the opposite winger. So I think Nottingham Forest have two setups that they could potentially look to play to stifle Liverpool. I think the 4-2-3-1 that they used earlier in the season is something that ultimately Liverpool had a lot of possession in that game. And despite Forest winning eventually 1-0, I would expect if that happened again and Liverpool had the sort of possession they had in that game, that they would be able to break Forest down. They will have had the break for a week. I don't think any of their main players will likely be starting in the midweek game in the Cup. And I would expect them to be fully rested for next week. So I think Nottingham Forest could look to set up in that sort of 3-4-2-1 formation that they obviously play, that Manchester United obviously played against Liverpool, and look to cause them that sort of the similar problems where their fullbacks can't get into the attack, and that Liverpool are going to have to break down Nottingham Forest without having as many players going forwards. Obviously, with the injury suffered to Jarell Quansah midweek, perhaps you might have to see either a Trent or it may be even an Endo fill in at centre-back against Accrington Stanley. Who are they? But I would imagine that most of Liverpool's key players will be rested for that game. What I would say is, although Nottingham Forest got the upper hand in Liverpool in the first game, I expect the second game to actually be quite different. And unless they do transition to this 3-4-2-1 formation, which they have played in previous weeks, I believe it was against Brentford in their 2-0 win there, I would expect Liverpool actually to go relatively well in this game and score some goals and cause Forest some problems. I do, however, think Forest will be difficulty for Liverpool in an attacking sense and may cause them some problems coming the other way. I do expect there to be some goals in this game, and therefore I do still think Salah is a nice captaincy option this week. Moving on to the Chelsea versus Bournemouth game, and obviously Cole Palmer being the key captaincy thought here. Bournemouth, you should know, are 5th in the league for goals conceded so far. They've actually had a fantastic season so far from a defensive standpoint, and are a team that have been quite difficult to break down and had a very good record. The only teams that have actually conceded less goals than them in the league this season have been Liverpool, Arsenal, Nottingham Forest and Newcastle. Chelsea obviously sit there actually in the 6th least goals conceded. So I do expect this game to be quite a tight affair. The previous game between Bournemouth and Chelsea was actually 1-0 with a late Nkunku winner for Chelsea. Bournemouth also set up in a 4-2-3-1 formation, which is the same as Chelsea's 4-2-3-1 setup. And that sort of, for me, means that Palmer is not going to have the spaces that he wants to get into in behind the lines and in between the lines for Bournemouth, because they've got those two holding midfielders, which will account for himself and whoever other pushes on into that sort of 8 and 10 role for Chelsea. This way, I think that what will happen is Chelsea will have quite a bit of possession, And if anything, I think Palmer will be someone who will be looking to take those sort of longer shots from outside the box, or potentially try and get on the ball a little bit deeper and provide some key passes to get Chelsea going forwards. I think for me, Palmer's real threat in this game is more of an assist threat to unlock the gates and open the game up for Chelsea. And I think potentially that is why I don't think he is the best captaincy option this week. I think Bournemouth have been really good defensively, have been excellent from set pieces, and this also makes me think that Enzo is not such a great option this week from a Chelsea perspective, and I would potentially look to bench him if you have a triple up on the Chelsea attack. Moving on to the Newcastle versus Wolves and Alexander Isak. He's also been someone that's been highly touted as a captain this week. Obviously, Isak's been in fantastic form for Newcastle, and Newcastle themselves have been in great form, beating Arsenal midweek in the first leg of the Cup 2-0, and also getting a 2-1 win last week against Tottenham. I did find Isak was, although fantastic against Arsenal, against Tottenham did have a few sloppy touches and wasn't his usual composed self on the ball, but made a couple of errors. However, I'm willing to write that off to just a couple of bad and sloppy possessions and passes, and I would say he's been in excellent form so far this season. In the previous fixture, Newcastle won this 2-1. However, I would say that both teams now have a really different tactical approaches. Newcastle ultimately have pushed Bruno Guimaraes a lot higher up the pitch, and him, Joelinton and Tonali in that midfield three have been pressing teams a lot higher up the pitch, trying to regain the ball in those high up possession areas, and then cause trouble for the opposition in that way. Newcastle have shown a lot more energy in the midfield, a lot higher press, and they've caused a lot of opposition's problems with this. Wolves now have gone to a back three with Matt Doherty sort of playing in that back three now, who's been very calm and composed for Wolves. Vitor Pereira has sort of allowed Wolves to become a little bit more compact going to that 3-4-2-1 formation, and that 3-4-2-1 formation also allows a box in midfield for Wolves, and that is something that they might look to sort of overload Newcastle in that midfield, given that Newcastle press with the three midfielders very high. If Wolves can actually just break through that press with four in the midfield, they've actually got Newcastle outnumbered in that area. And even if what Newcastle have been doing is Dan Burns been sort of pressing up onto one of the midfielders, if you do have sort of Cunha and maybe a Sarabia in that area, it will allow Wolves to potentially break through that press and have a bit more possession and be a bit calmer on the ball. So I do think that the key to the Newcastle attack this week will be Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento, or potentially Kieran Trippier in the fullback roles. I think that's where the space is going to be to exploit for Wolves, and I think Lewis Hall is a really nice option for this game week, both as an attacking and potentially as a defensive option for Newcastle. And his ability to get down the wing and put crosses into the box, as well as Gordon and Murphy into Isak, is going to be really important in Isak fulfilling a good role as captain this week. For me, I think the compactness of Wolves and the way that they're playing this 3-4-2-1 role does sort of narrow the space for Isak, allows the defenders to a couple more defenders to be around him, and I do think he will find it a little bit more difficult this week with the formation that Wolves employ. Moving on to Mbeumo v Manchester City. Now, Manchester City have really struggled defensively in transition this year, specifically in the central areas of the pitch. But I have also seen Josko Gvardiol on City's left-hand side, which would be the right-hand side, and Mbeumo's position for Brentford, really struggle in terms of where to be positionally. He's never quite sure, with Rico Lewis inverting on the right into defensive midfield, whether he should be going forwards or staying back, and he's ended up in these sort of half spaces and sort of had to be often backing off against players and struggled in those sort of one-on-one situations. I think that's definitely something Mbeumo could exploit. I also think Yohan Wissa is going to find himself in acres of space for Brentford and is probably the most likely player for me to bag a big return for Brentford. However, I do think Mbeumo is also a fantastic option. Brentford offensively in transition is really their key skill. Mbeumo with his sort of progressive dribbles, progressive carries, is one of the players this season that gets up the field very quickly and is involved in a lot of Brentford counter-attacking play. I think Brentford are going to cause Man City a lot of problems. Despite the last game being a 1-1 draw, I think 1-1 draw, Brentford? 2-1, sorry, to Man City. I thought it was. Haaland scored 2 in that game. Despite that game being a 2-1 win for Man City, the possession was relatively equal in that game. And I think now Man City are a little bit more fragile defensively, don't have the confidence behind them, and I think Brentford can really look to exploit them with some fast-paced counter-attacks. I think Mbeumo looks a really fantastic option. Brentford could look to set up as a 3-5-2 or a 4-3-3. I think the 3-5-2 would favour Mbeumo through the middle in transition, but I think a 4-3-3 could be equally as effective if they can exploit Man City in those transitional areas. Moving on to Bruno Fernandes against Southampton. Now, this is one that I think a lot of the subscribers have called for discussing. I think Juric for Southampton has employed this sort of counter press where they've looked to sort of press the teams a lot higher up the pitch and try and win the ball back in those higher positions. However, I do think Southampton have not really got the sort of footballing IQ and ability to understand conceptually the right times for them to be going and pressing and winning the ball. And not just that, is when their sort of front players do find those good times to press and win the ball, their midfield and their sort of defensive midfielders are not used to this sort of system and are not able to then be that second line of press, and the pass is often made through quite easily to the second line, and then immediately teams can start getting at Southampton. That's exactly what Brentford did to them in the second half last week, and why they managed to get the 5-0 win. Now, I think with Manchester United, they definitely have the potential to do this. With Bruno's role in Amorim's setup, essentially he's in that 3-4-2-1 role. He would be the person that's sort of receiving the ball in between the lines, in between those sort of Southampton counter-pressing periods, and try and turn and create something with the ball. I think in this way he's going to definitely be somebody that could be a good option this week with the sort of tactical setup that United use. However, my one issue with Manchester United is the consistency that they've been able to turn in these performances. I think that Amorim will likely set up with the same team that managed the 2-2 draw against Liverpool, and that means they've got a lot more legs in the midfield, and that's something we've spoken a lot about this year, with Ugarte and Mainu in that central midfield role for United, allow them to have a lot more energy in that midfield. Having that energy in midfield allows Bruno Fernandes to play a little bit higher, to get in between those lines and in those pockets of space, and to be able to feed the striker. I think this for him is a game where he can definitely get in those spaces, be creative, potentially take some longer shots and look for some opportunities to score. I think he is a nice option against Southampton at home this week. Next up on the list is Raul Jimenez up against West Ham. West Ham have finally sacked Lopetegui after some very poor performances this season and are now under Graham Potter, who obviously previously managed Brighton and Chelsea. I think Graham Potter had some really interesting tactical setups, specifically in that Brighton team, and got them playing a really fantastic style of football and brought in some excellent players in that team. I think Graham Potter will get the best out of this West Ham team over time. Potentially might take it a little bit of time for him to implement his changes. Maybe we will see a new manager bounce. However, I think it might take Potter a little bit of time just to sort of find the right setup of players. But once he does, I think there's a lot of talent in this West Ham side, and they might start to pick up soon. Jimenez, from a goal scoring perspective, obviously got 2 penalties last week, but outside of that, I don't think he's been in the best goal scoring form for Fulham. He obviously has managed a few returns over the last few weeks for Fulham. However, I just think at the moment he's not my favourite option in this game. I do think Fulham are a good side. However, I think they have multiple different routes to goal. He's not sort of the same role that Chris Wood plays in a Nottingham Forest team as sort of the focal point at all of the end attacks. Fulham have a lot of different players getting into the box and trying to get into those penalty area, 18-yard box areas to score goals. I don't think Jimenez is ultimately always the main man, and therefore he's just not somebody that I would look to captain in a week, especially as a striker with only 4 points for the goal, and with the way the bonus points are set up to often favour the midfielders that can score points as well as allowing an extra point for the clean sheet. I wouldn't go for him as a captain. Finally, moving on to Haaland. Obviously found a little bit of form recently for Man City. Man City offensively have looked a lot better. The reason for this, as we've talked about, is that switch from Savio from the right wing to the left wing. As I've spoken about in the past on my channel in the tactical observation videos, I find that Man City are at their most effective going forwards. Think back to sort of the Raheem Sterling, Riyad Mahrez days, when their wingers would be getting down the line and be able to cut balls back into the box, or they'd be just inside that 18-yard box and be able to sort of look, turn, run around there with the ball. The defenders can't get too close to them because they don't want to give away a penalty, and therefore they're able to sort of pull those balls back into the box. Other than that, they've got to be running down to the byline and whipping those crosses into the box. Savio, obviously being left-footed, means that if he beats his player down that left wing, he's able to whip in those balls into the box for Haaland. Haaland, obviously a monster in the box, can make something out of a lot of those crosses. So I think his switch over to left wing's been really important. When he was playing on that right wing role, he was often cutting inside into his left foot and narrowing those spaces with the 10, which was a Foden or a De Bruyne, who Foden was getting visibly frustrated by the fact Savinho would often drift inside to him and narrow those spaces. A lot of teams that play against City have played a narrow box in the midfield and have been shutting down the middle spaces and making City get wider. So now with De Bruyne moving a little bit out to the right to whip in some balls into the box, Savinho whipping the balls in for the left side, and often Foden drifting out to the right and trying to get into the 18-yard box space and cut balls back. This has made City a lot more effective from an offensive standpoint. I do think Haaland is still a nice option for captaincy, but realistically, if you do have Haaland in your team, you have him in your team because he should be your captain. At that price point, the reason for him is he's going to get you big returns. If you have Haaland in your team, I think my option would be to captain him in most weeks. I'd say he's probably an option for maybe the next 2 weeks. If you don't have him, I wouldn't be buying him or bringing him in for this game week. And if you do have him, I would think about moving him on after the next 2 weeks. For me, he's somebody that maybe I'll be looking at towards 29 when City's fixtures get a little bit nicer. This was a bit of a test period for me, but I think Savio is my favourite at this moment in time. So look guys, if you have enjoyed this video so far, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, say subscribe for the live stream later coming up this week, potentially some more videos. I did do a sort of buy, sell, hold with the best defenders, midfielders and forwards. Check that out, I'll leave a link to it up above if you do want to see that. And now finally we'll get on to my ranking of who I think the best captaincy options are for this week. This is how I've got it, and I have still, after thinking through all of the captaincy options this week, and to be honest I was very close to picking either an Mbeumo or a Fernandes over Salah. I do still think Mo Salah is the best captaincy option this week. I think Liverpool will find a way to break down Nottingham Forest. I think from a defensive perspective, obviously Forest are a great team, but the form Salah's been in and the form Liverpool have been in this year, I can see him continuing to get returns. I think for me it was very close between him and Mbeumo, and I'm still sort of sitting a little bit on the fence with it. I think Mbeumo is a fantastic option on penalties against Man City, defensively very fragile. Brentford exceptional on the counter, but at the moment he is sort of my number 2 choice. And Bruno Fernandes I think is also a really nice option for captaincy this week. against Southampton, counter press, being able to get in between those lines in that Manchester United midfield, with hopefully Mbeumo and Ugarte being able to provide the energy defensively for Man United. I think all three of those options are good captaincy options. I wouldn't begrudge any of you of going for any of those three guys. I do think that others have slightly less reasoning from a sort of tactical standpoint to be going for them this week as captains. I do have Erling Haaland in red there as a 1. I think if you have him in your team, you should be captaining him. He sort of sits outside of these options for me. So I think if you have Haaland, you captain him. Otherwise, Salah and Mbeumo, Fernandes are my top 3 options this week. And that is what I'll be going for. Once again, guys, thank you so much. If you watched the end of the video, please give this a like, subscribe to the channel, and stay up to date with my videos coming up. Hopefully see you guys all on the live stream later this week, where I'll be doing team reviews and transfer plans and be replying to all of your comments in the chat. Thanks very much for watching, guys. This has been your English Aussie, and I'll see you guys next week.